Welcome. So this session is about how to get people to talk in interviews. It's interview secrets. So I do this daily for a living on GTV. I interview people. And there was a time last year where back to back for like 4 or 5 weeks, the guests came and they cried, really. I asked them questions and then they're crying. So now the whole thing was, can they come on the show and not cry? I don't want you to get all your guests to be crying all the time. But getting information out of people is a skill that you can learn, okay? And it can make very good content. And but there are ways to do it, which, if you follow, will give you good results, okay? Growing up, I watched a lot of CNN. And back then, there was a journalist, a broadcaster who I really admired for the kind of people who could come on the show and the kind of things they could say to him on that show, 1 hour. And this guy was called Larry King. And he had a 60-year-plus broadcast career. He started out as radio and then went onto television. In the end, he got onto YouTube. He had his own channel on YouTube. So he went through all the media. And when I look back at some of the interviews, the kind of people he spoke to, he did it in a way that looked very simple, but was very effective. Now, Larry King said he did no research, which is a bit dangerous. But his whole idea was that I want to be like the man or woman who is watching me on television, who doesn't also know anything about the guest who is there, so that I can be as curious as possible and ask questions from the point of view of somebody who doesn't know anything. And when I look back, I think it actually made sense. So he comes into the interview with a blank slate, no prepared ideas, no notions, and he comes and asks very simple questions, almost like a child. Daddy, why is the sky blue? Children ask questions like that. Where did I come from? And he's 3 or 4, she's 5 or 6, but they're asking very simple questions, which can get good answers if you have somebody who can give those answers, okay? So Larry King's strategy was, first of all, no research, which I don't quite follow. I like to do a lot of research, so I know a lot about my guests. But I understand where he's coming from. And he said, but there's 3 things that he recommended, and those ones I follow. He said, the art of the good interview. If you want to give a good interview, number 1, ask short questions. Number 2, let me deal with number 1 first. Ask short questions, okay? How short is a short question? Well, once upon a time on CNN, during the first Gulf War, not the second one that took out Saddam, the first one where Iraq invaded Kuwait back in the 90s, early 90s, 1990. So that was around the first time that the wars were televised live. So the army used to have broadcasters, TV and radio people join them in the middle of the war, and they'll report live from the war front straight to cable TV, to CNN, to Fox, whatever. And every day there would be a briefing about what happened. And so on one particular night, Larry King had a U.S. general come on his show. I forget what the general's name was, but let's assume his name was General Schwartz. So Larry King introduces the program. Says, well, good evening, welcome to Larry King Live. And tonight is day 44 of the Iraq War, blah, blah, blah. And we have the general the commanding officer from the 101st Airborne Division come to us to talk to us today. General, good evening, what happened? That was his first question. General, good evening, what happened? He's talking about the war operations. Then the general talks. And Larry is just there listening to him. Talks, lets him talk. And another question. Then the guy keeps talking. Larry listens. Then the third question, he didn't even open his mouth. And the guy talked. And the guy just spoke about stuff that was going on. Really effective questioning. So I try to use those techniques when I do my interviews. And A lot of feedback I get is that you allow the guests to talk. But that is the point. If a guest comes onto your show, or you are interviewing somebody in the street who has witnessed some accident or whatever, you want an eyewitness account, you give the microphone to the person so the person can talk. So don't ask a very long question. Okay, General, we know that you are the General of the 101st Division, blah, 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 blah. In the scheme of things, in this particular war that began 4 years ago and has continued now, how do you say has been the success of today's show? Was it a success or a failure? Why give multiple choice answers, options in your question? Just ask a simple question. And if you want people to talk, think of the 5 W's and the H. A what question, a why question, a who question, a when question, a where question, and a how question. General, what happened? Where do you think this is going? Who do you hold responsible for this? Why are you so concerned about this matter? When do you think this event will end? How far do you think this war will continue? Short questions. So that's Larry King's first tip. Ask short questions. I cannot stress that long enough. So your intros don't have to be long. I'm following certain podcasts and vlogs on YouTube. There was one show, listen, the lady's introduction was about 10 seconds. Good evening, you're welcome to, and then we have tonight Hans Abloh. Boom, first question. And I was timing it. Within 30 seconds, the guest was already speaking. No long intro, no long questions, just get to the point. I remember I went to the Parliament, House of Parliament recently when the Minister of Finance did his budget. And after the budget, you have a lot of members of Parliament in the lobby, and you have a competition amongst radio and TV stations to catch them and ask them questions. So we're about 6 or 7 radio stations all looking for people to speak to. And that is where you see the importance of speed and getting to the point. So I remember I met I didn't meet him. He was going to his own place, and I accosted him with my microphone. This is the Minister for Trade and Industry, Honorable K.T. Hammond. So I meet him, and I mentioned quickly Kafui Day, GTV, and then I think I asked him a question about what he thought about the opposition's reaction to the budget. Boom. Quickly. And then he started speaking. And then he said, "But young gentleman, I don't have time for this long interview." I said, "But sir, you are giving me nuggets." You know, kind of massage his ego small. And then he opened up and he kept speaking again. And spoke for far longer than he would have if I had done a long intro and a long question. He wouldn't have had time for me. These are called doorstep interviews, and it happens a lot in the UK, where they accost the minister on the doorstep, going to his office, and then they quickly ask him a question, or he's coming out of his house, and they ask him a quick question, you get a sound bite, and you're good to go. Don't ask him, are you ready for the interview? No. The person is in a hurry. Don't ask him whether he will say, I'm not ready for the interview, and that's over. So you quickly get to the point. Ask a very short question quickly, which leads me to the second point that Larry King, I learned from Larry King. What I learned from Larry King. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. A lot of the times, interviewers have, first of all, a prepared list of questions. And they probably have, if it's on television, they probably have a producer in their ear telling them to go through all the questions. There are 20 questions. You're on question 1. You want to go to question 2. You want to go to question 3. But maybe at question 2, he said something interesting, or she said something interesting, which required a follow-up, and you didn't follow it up. But the follow-up could have been the news. You understand? But because you're in a hurry to just go through all your list of questions, you miss an opportunity to get something out of the person. You understand? So you have to listen very carefully. Don't be looking at your next question to ask. It's a conversation. When we converse, we don't have papers in front of us. You know? We are just conversing with somebody. Okay? So you want to make sure that you are on the alert, listening for clues. You know, I remember so I'm trying to remember a situation where listening to the response actually got me a piece of news that I wasn't expecting. You know, just recently we had an interview with this young lady who is she's attempting to break the Guinness record for the longest time to sing. So she's trying to get like a 5-day interview, a 5-day this thing. And I got so much out of her just by asking like really brief questions and listening to her responses and then following up on those responses. Because for example, I remember I asked her, so you're going to be singing, she says she's going to be singing lots of only strictly Ghanaian songs, okay? So then I asked her, so does the Ghana music, the Musicians Association of Ghana, are they aware of what she's doing? She says no. Then I asked, if you're singing Ghanaian songs, how about the Ghana Music Rights Organization, GAMRO? Because GAMRO are the people who make sure that your copyright issues are done, you know? And she claimed that, oh no, well, they've sent. So a whole conversation came out as a result of that particular GAMRO thing. That wasn't even on the list of questions that I was given to ask her about. And that issue blew up into a big matter because it turned out that at that time they hadn't sent the songs to the rights organization for clearance. And so GAMRO could have they could have stopped the competition. And that became news, you know. And so now this news blows up from an interview we had. I'm sad that we didn't write the story because that was the news. Somebody else wrote the story because it was news, you know. And then it blew up, and then the GAMRO chief executive had to come and respond. And she's now sent her songs to GAMRO. They've approved it. But it was a piece of news that almost could have gone if I hadn't followed up and then asked the right questions. Okay, so you need to always listen very carefully, because listening carefully leads to the third of Larry King's tips: follow up. Okay, ask short questions, listen carefully to the response, follow up, and always remember that when somebody says something on the radio or television, they wanted to say it. Okay? If they didn't want to say it, they won't say it. And even if they don't say it, you can still follow up. I realize that you don't want to answer. Are you comfortable with? You can actually, silence also is a response that you can also follow up on. What if the person starts crying on the stage? And it's happened a lot on the show. So people get really emotional. I remember Samini came on GTV last year, and he was speaking about the death of one of his friends. I'm trying to remember his friend's name. I'm sure my people will Google it and find it for me. And so Samini was talking about how he was very close to this man, and this man actually gave him a break in his music career when this man was living in the UK, and Samini in the beginning of his career went to the UK to perform there, and then when he finished performing, I think Samini wanted to stay in the UK, and this man said, no, come back to Ghana. Sonny Bali, the actor, the musician is called Sonny Bali. So Sonny Bali advised him to come back to Ghana, and because he was a star in Ghana, he shouldn't come and hustle in the UK and everything. And then Sonny Bali died last year, and Samini came on the show, you know. And Samini at that time was vying to be SRC president at Gimpa University. So we're talking about that, and then I brought in the Sonny Bali issue, and then he started talking about the relationship and everything. And then when he started remembering the time that he had with him, he stopped. And then I realized that he was breaking down, you know. So that was me listening, okay? So when I realized he was breaking down, I just chilled. And I just kept quiet, you know. And then Samini got really emotional. He started shedding some tears and everything. And I just kept quiet, you know. I kept quiet. In those emotional interviews, you don't want to now say, oh, stop crying, don't cry. That person is trying to cry already. The person is expressing themselves. So why did you do it? I didn't even offer him a tissue, you know. Later on, they brought a tissue to him. I just kept quiet. You know, you don't have to talk all the time because you're the interviewer. That's the point I'm trying to make, okay? If you ask a short question, the person responds, you listen very carefully, the person is expressing themselves no matter what. You let them express themselves. That's why they are there, okay? You know, and then after we followed up, and we ended the interview on a good note. And he even cracked a joke that, well, I wanted I wanted him to show his emotions. Have I gotten what I wanted? I said, no, man, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'll get to the questions later, so keep them. All right? So I can't stress this often enough. The short questions. Most of the journalists, broadcasters, ask way too long questions. You know why? Because from the previous video, I was talking about how you want to shift focus away from yourself to the audience. A lot of interviewers want the focus to come to them. Okay? So I want to let the people know that I've done my research. I know the issues. If you know the issues, be a panelist. Be a guest. Let somebody interview you. But it is not your job to know the issues. Well, you should know the issues, but you don't have to come and say the issues out there. Let the person who you invited, give them the platform to speak. Okay? So long questions to sound intelligent, no, go to the point, straight to the point. Hey, what's going on, man? What's up? And then you, depending on the mood, on the person you are dealing with, you can be informal or formal, depending on the audience, okay? But you want to ask short questions, you want to listen carefully, and then you want to follow. That, for me, is the essence of a great interview. An interview where you allow the person to express themselves, and then you just follow up for clarification. What do you mean when you said this? Do you mean this, and this is what you were meaning in this? That's how you do it. Before you get to ask the questions, the internet is a great place, especially social media, for research. I remember the first time I interviewed KSM, Kweku Sintim-Misa, the comedian, the satirist. My entire research was done from things he tweeted for like a year. So I just went to his Twitter timeline, and he says interesting things. So I basically highlighted the tweets I wanted to have my conversations around. And I said, well, on this day, 6 March, so, you said this, and I quote the tweet. He says, wow, you. I said, yes, man, I did my research. And presenters and guests are really impressed when they see that the interviewer has done their research. So unlike Larry King, who said he didn't do any research, I say do your research and use it to inform your questions. So the whole entire interview was based on his tweets. And it went down really, really well. You can look for the interview on Facebook. So, I quoted him. I said, look, on this day you said this. What did you mean? And then we had a conversation on so many things: religion, politics, corruption. Complete interview based on that. So you can use what people said on their own timelines as a basis of your research. The most common way I do my research before doing interviews is I just go online and I type the person's name in and then click on Google News and see what is the latest stuff that has been written about the person. Yesterday, I had Kobe Sam. Kobe Sam is an urban gospel musician who came in. He's promoting an event happening this weekend. So when I Googled him, I found out that, he had been to Kenya before, So, and that was one of my first questions in my list of questions. Sometimes I ignore the questions that the producers give me, okay? I'm not recommending it, but that's what I do sometimes, So I decided to start from that area, that side of things. So what was Kenya like? Because I knew he had been to Kenya already, my research. And then he opened up to me and told me about how his music, for some reason, was big in Kenya. And that is what got him to go to Kenya, to go and do a video there and do a collabo with another musician and everything. So we had a whole conversation based on that. But I just asked him, what's Kenya like? And then he went off and we explored things that were not on my list of questions. But I think we got a good interview out of it because he told us things that I didn't know about Kenya. For example, he told us that in the video you had lots of like an army of bare-chested young men. And the Kenyan audience didn't like that kind of visual in their gospel videos. They don't think that Christians should be hanging around with half-naked men. So that was something quite interesting for me, But I wouldn't have gotten it out if I hadn't asked him that simple question about what Kenya was like, okay? And this is still in the realms of like broadcasting, TV or radio, but you can apply it to people. So today I interviewed Foster Romanos, the comedian. But when I went to I asked him, which platform do you use the most? we came on air. So that time before you go on air, the time before you go on air, the time before you go live, the time before you record, you use that to get a little more information from the person you are interviewing, okay? So he says, oh, he's an IG guy. Right after the show, he'll go on IG. So I went on IG and I found out his description. What he described, he himself has written on his profile. And he says he's a worshiper, he's a musician, he's a master of ceremonies, he's a comic artist, he's a comedian, he's a counselor, you know. So I said, okay, wow, I didn't know this. So when we started and then we went through the conversation, and somewhere through the interview I asked him, so what's the difference between a comedian and a comic artist? And that became a whole angle of conversation. I found out that he had recorded some worship music. Didn't know that. 1 hour of worship, Foster Romanus, you know, and it was just in his bio. You know, so people's bios reveal a lot about them. Social media is a great place for you to get information if you're going to do your interviews. Because that's their information. They put their information out there. It's not some blogger who has written some gossip about them. It's their own handle. So I look at people's handles. In fact, I followed him just before he went on air, you know. And then I read his bio, and I used his bio to craft my questions, okay? So there's what they post, who they say they are, you know? When I'm doing, like, personality interviews with somebody who has a name that is not the name that is in his past. Say, for example, Stonebwoy. His name is Eche Satekla. So I can ask him, hey, so who still calls you Eche? You know? I spoke to one musician recently who said his father calls him by his stage name now. You know? I think that was last week. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the person. So his father calls him by his stage name. He doesn't call him by the name that he has. If I remember his name, I'll know. But people like to talk about themselves. So things around identity and stuff, this is for celebrities, you know. You can get a lot of information from their own stuff, their own social media. Because social media, you control your own social media. You put out what you want there. Nobody puts out any negative stuff there willingly. So it's your stuff. So for research purposes, please use that. Research, I also use ChatGPT a lot when I'm trying to get maybe unusual questions that I want to ask. I tell ChatGPT, and ChatGPT only responds to the quality of the questions you give it. So I said, oh, I'm interviewing a stand-up comedian from Ghana. Give me 5 unusual questions I can ask him about his work and everything. And then you can use those questions and then go ask him and get something interesting, okay? Yeah. For man in the street questions, if you are like a producer and you are going to interview somebody in the streets, you first of all want to make sure that they are willing to do the interview. I've seen a few interviews where when the camera comes to the person says, I don't want to be interviewed, and that's really embarrassing. It means the producer didn't do a good job. Okay, so you normally work with a producer who will prepare the people for you. Preparation is key, all right? Prepare. Get ready before the event, okay? So they prepare the person, they let the person know they'll be coming on, this is the amount of time the person has, and then you ask them the questions. People tend to be very self-conscious when they know the microphone is on them. You know, so you want to try and relax them. Even on television, I tell the people who come to sit at my desk that just imagine it's a conversation between me and you, Lucia, or me and you, Hamdia. Ignore the cameras, okay? Ignore the monitors. Just we're having a chat. Ignore them. So where do I look? Don't look on the monitor and admire your makeup. Look at me and let's talk. You know, yeah. And then when you say that, then people just tend to relax. And your job, it is your job as the interviewer to relax when the people are relaxed, they talk. Okay? If you relax the people, they talk. So it's really important to meet them, maybe before they go on air, have a brief chat, ask them, what is your message today? What do you want to leave at the end of this interview? When we are done, what do you want people to take away from this? And the person will tell, oh, I'm promoting Romanus Incomplete, or I'm promoting this, or I have a new gospel album out, or I have this out. And then you guide your conversation around what they want to produce, what they want to promote, okay? Interviewing, when it's done well, it should sound like a chat, okay? It should sound like a chat with a friend. When there's controversy involved, I sometimes ask, I remember when Yvonne Nelson came to GTV, I asked her, is there any area of your life you don't want to go to? She said, no, we can go anywhere. And then we went. You know, some people will tell you that I will do this interview, but I don't want you to talk about this. Respect that as well. Okay? Yeah. So in the end, it's not about tripping people up. You're not interviewing people to make them look bad. Okay? But you can also ask a question that can get an interviewee really riled up and angry. I remember the late E.T. Mensah, former Minister for Sports, Youth and Sports, and former member of the Council of State, Greater Accra. Right after the election that took him out of his seat, this is 2016. The election took place 2016 December, and then towards the end of December, just around the time they were vying for the Council of State seats, I got him on my show on GH1 TV. And if you do remember, if you're in Ghana, you remember that around that time, he was feeling really sore because a young guy called Sam George had taken him off the seat, and he wasn't really happy with issues. But the day before the interview, I saw a news clip where Sam George was congratulating E.T. Mensah for putting himself up to be Council of State member for Greater Accra. So I thought, oh, this is nice. I thought the guys were fighting, but if Sam George is congratulating him, I'll bring it up in the interview. So this is a 1-hour interview. After 8 minutes or so, I kind of steered the conversation toward that, and I said, I just read in the news that the MP for Dingo Pram Pram, Sam George, is congratulating you for going for... He didn't even allow me to finish the sentence. He says, young man, I've told you that I've consigned that man to the dustbin of history. If you want us to continue this interview, don't mention his name in this room. And then my director now was talking to my ears, change the topic, because he was afraid the guy is going to leave, and he could have walked out. So I just swiftly went somewhere else, and we continued the interview, and we ended on a nice note. He was singing some Methodist hymns at the end or something. But you see, that was a tricky situation that could have gotten the interview to end only after 8 minutes. Yeah. So you have to read the situation. If the person is getting angry, quickly move away. Yes. And any other sticky situations? I remember interviewing once, and the politicians seem to be the ones who give problems. One Johnson Asiedu Nketia, he is now the chairman of the National Democratic Congress. Back then, he was general secretary. This is about almost 9-10 years ago. I was on radio, and any question I asked this man, he gave me a 1 or 2 word answer. Yes, no, maybe. No matter how I did it, yes, no, maybe. I took a commercial break and ended the interview. Yeah, I wasn't going anywhere. He just didn't want to talk, And sometimes you have people like that who do not want to talk, Your job is not to force them. Try and make it comfortable for them. If the interview is going nowhere, end the interview, okay? And then look for another interview to do to get the pain out of this one, out of your system, But I look forward to it because you really don't know what somebody will say, But if you ask questions skillfully, people can reveal things to you. I remember speaking to Kafri Danko, the actress, and she's quite busy on Facebook counseling young girls who have emotional and relationship issues. And then we were speaking somewhere, and then she spoke about some girl who was being abused by somebody she knew very well, and she was just recounting the story. And then all of a sudden, Kafri Danko started crying on national television. And I always do what I normally do when people start crying. I just keep quiet. I don't say, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. I just kept quiet, yeah. And she went for a while, and she stopped. She says, oh, you got me to cry on national television. I said, well, you felt like crying, Kafui, and I just allowed you to cry, Yeah, so be comfortable with silence. If you're a good interviewer, you must be comfortable with silence. Sometimes silence, you see, because if you say something and don't break the silence. I remember this one so clearly, and it pained me because we could have gotten some story out of Van Vicker. This was 2021, we just started the GTV Breakfast Show, and Van Vicker was on the set, Van Vicker, the actor. And around that time, the Taliban had just invaded Iraq and taken over Iraq. And there were pictures of people trying to escape Iraq, hanging onto aeroplanes and everything as the planes were leaving Iraq. And so Van Vicker came in there. We were doing the interview. I was doing the interview with one of my co-presenters. And Vicar said when he saw that scene, it reminded him of when they were escaping Liberia, because he escaped Liberia during the Liberian War in 1990 and came to Ghana and became a refugee here. So it reminded him of the Liberian War. And then at the moment, Vicar's voice came down, and I think he almost started tearing up. And then if I were doing that interview by myself, I would have just kept quiet. And Van would have just broken down and spoken. But then one of the interviewers said, oh, I can see you're getting emotional. When someone is getting emotional, the last thing for you to say is, I can see you're getting emotional. Okay? Because the person is getting emotional already. You don't have to say the obvious. So I can see and then we lost the moment. There are certain moments in the interview, if it passes, it's gone. And I thought, oh, man, this would have been a good headline. But it's gone. And it can't come back again. So when the person is getting emotional, let the person get emotional. Okay? If they're happy, if we see the person being happy, do we say, I can see you're getting happy? No. Let the person be happy, Yeah, but those are the secrets. You have to just be able to almost have a sixth sense. Okay? Treat the person with respect. And the person is expressing themselves, allow the person to express themselves. But remember, always, the questions have to be short. When you're having conversations, you give long questions. Oh, it's a really bright morning, a bright afternoon here at Chado, at Jumbo Spaces. And Lucia, before you answer this question, I'd like to say that it's really nice meeting you, blah, 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 blah. And then you ask your question. It's so long. And then I've heard guests say, what was the question again? Yeah. Anytime a guest says that, you have messed up. But don't show you've messed up. Just remember that the next interview, you don't make that mistake. What's the question again? I do that a lot when I am emceeing. And when it comes to question time, there are people who ask questions just because they want to hear the sound of their voices. So they'll ask a long question. Blah, 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 I'll be there, I'll be smiling very diplomatically. I said, where was the question, please? And the question was, or you rephrase the question. So, in other words, what you are trying to say is, the sky is blue. Is that it? And the person realizes the error of their ways. And so hate long intros. Hate with a passion. Hate it like sin. Okay? Hate long intros. Hate long questions. Love to listen carefully. If you listen carefully, you will get gems. Gems. Be prepared for your interview to go in an area that you didn't plan for it to go. Okay? And then always follow up. Always follow up. Look for the news and follow up. Today, for example, on our list of topics for our interviews on GTV, it was the exam results, WASSCE exam results. It was also district level elections. But the big news that was not reported was what Pope Francis had said with respect to homosexual couples and things. Yeah, and so and it wasn't on my list, but I brought it in, and then we brought the Archbishop in to speak to him and ask him certain questions about it. And towards the end, I remember I asked him, so what kind of feedback have you gotten from your Catholic people? They said, he hasn't been able to sleep. Because people have been calling him left, right, and center. I think that's a headline. Don't you think so? Yeah. Archbishop says he can't sleep because of gay couples. That would be a good headline, right? You've made a headline. You understand? But you have to listen carefully. You have to ask short questions. So I think the first question I asked him is, what did Pope Francis mean by so and so? And then he started speaking. Then I clarified, does it mean that they can only bless if you come as an individual? Gay couples cannot be blessed, but if you came individually, they'll bless you. He said yes. Questions, okay? Then we ask questions. But you must always ask questions. You must be curious, okay? The number one secret, even before short questions and listening carefully and following up, is curiosity. If you want to be a great interviewer, you have to be curious. I remember my son, my eldest son, he's 19 now, but when he was young, this was his favorite question. What is that? What is that? He pointed and said, what is that? What is that? What is that? And we have to answer. Because he wanted to know, what is that? Who is that? When did that happen? Where did it happen? Why is it so? Short questions. Kids ask great questions. What is that? It's one of the best questions in the world. Yeah? So ask short questions. But you must be curious first. The mentality of as an interviewer, you're not there to show people that you know the subject. That's not why people are listening to you. If I had an interview with, who would I like to interview that I haven't interviewed before? Shatta Wale. If I want to interview Shatta Wale, I'll just go and read through. His tweets are interesting. That would be my research for Shatta Wale. His tweets are the best. I can just have the full interview on his tweets. And I won't come and say, oh, your name is Charles something Tego Mensah, you were born in this, you did this. No. I'll start with the freshest thing he's talking about, and we'll work backwards from that. And have a great conversation with him, make him feel that he's being respected, won't try to diss him, won't try to trap him. A lot of interviewers want to trap the guests. So he's almost like a grass cutter that they are laid ambush for. Let me trap him and get some news, Another one that I heard that really was just too much for me. When Wendy Shea walked out of an interview with one chap from Accra FM. I think it's Nana Romeo. Is that his name? Yeah. Yes. She walked out of the interview. Because this lady comes in there to promote her new song. And the presenter is only interested in finding out what the status of her romantic relationship is with her producer. And the artist says, listen, I came here to promote my music. That's the objective. You remember what I said? Always ask the guest, what is your aim? Why are you here? What do you want to promote? Anybody who comes to sit on a radio or television or has a microphone in front of their mouth, if they've agreed to speak, it means there's something they want to promote. And she kept telling him, I'm here to promote my music. But this guy just wants to know whether she's having an affair or having some kind of relationship with her producer. So the thing went on back, forth, and she finally got up and left. He says, this is highly unprofessional, and this is going nowhere. And she got up and left. You understand? And I backed her 100%. Yeah. It's not going anywhere. You're not getting the content. You're not getting the Maybe he thought he was getting good content by being controversial. Okay? But she was not getting her aim. She wanted to promote her music. So you're not promoting my music, you're talking about something else. It's completely irrelevant. And she walked off. And walking off, I've never had anybody walk off my set yet. Although I've had it happen to one of my co-presenters. But I wasn't on the interview, and it wasn't pretty at all. And it had to do with Shatta Wale again. So this was Tic Tac, he's now called Tick, the musician, who came on GH1 to promote his business. And then while the interview is going on, the director showed a picture of some background of Shatta Wale on the back. And Tick says, he looks behind and he sees it. He says, but I'm here, you're talking about me, and you're promoting somebody else. Man, I'm out of here. He walked off, and it was really embarrassing, but I could understand him as well, and that was a mistake from the production. Director should have done that. So please, respect the feelings. If you want a good interview, you must respect the feelings of the interviewee. You don't have to agree with everything they say. But look, I interviewed a prostitute on World Prostitute Day. It's June 2 every year. I was curious. That's the only reason why I interviewed her. I was curious. I was wondering, what's it like to be a prostitute or a sex worker? I think I go for the word prostitute. Sex worker is just glamorizes. It's a prostitute. So I went to the roundabout close to in Cantonments near the Togo Embassy area, and I drove around for a while, and then I parked, and the prostitute came over. She leaned into my car, and we had a negotiation. I asked her, listen, how much are you charging for your services? She said, I think 400 CDs or so. And I negotiated it down she said, no, she said 500 CDs. I brought it down to about 350 or so. She sits in the car. The first thing I tell her is that, madam, here's your money. I'm not interested in sleeping with you. I'm just interested in interviewing somebody who does the work that you do. After I gave her the money. She looks at me for a while, and she says, how sure am I that there are no cameras in this car? I said, well, there are no cameras in the car. She said, well, I have to be sure, because one of my people was interviewed by a radio station recently, and before we saw the picture of her colleague all over social media. So she wants to check there's no camera in the car. I said, madam, check before we move, check. So she looked around, no camera. All I had was my recorder. I said, are you ready? You have your money? Yeah. And then we started. It was 1 hour of a world that I never knew. Because of curiosity, that's all. That she lives in the central region and comes to work in the Greater Accra region every day, Kaswa to Osu, every day. She only does the prostitution when her children are away in boarding school. Yes. When they come home, she's off. She doesn't want them to know what she does. I talked about hassles with the police. I talked about, she said she still goes to church. No, she said she doesn't go to church again. She used to go to church, but she doesn't go to church again because she's not happy. She doesn't think God is happy with what she does, but she would like to change. She would like to do something new. I asked her, what would you do if your children found out? I said she would kill herself. She said it straight. Yeah, you know. How did she jump into the prostitution? How did she get into prostitution? Her husband died, and for a while, she wasn't finding ways to make ends meet, and a friend suggested that this is what they do, you know. Did she get attacked by people? So once in a while, people attack them, you know. It's a risky life. It was just a very revealing interview, but it was just based on my curiosity, and I was upfront with her, you know, and didn't want to take advantage of her, give her respect, and I got a good story from her, you know. Interviews that I've had that I've really, really enjoyed and learnt a lot. I mean, every time, there are always moments. Just recently, I had one with Ben Doche-Malo, who used to work with BBC. This guy I used to listen to back then. And I know him a little bit, but I knew him a little bit more after the interview. The interview should be able to give aspects of the person's life that you did not have before, okay? Yeah. And then sometimes when there are bad interviews, you didn't prepare, you know, and then you don't have a good job. And then you feel it that, man, this interview didn't go anywhere. You know, nothing really came out of it. It was just like a promotional piece. The person must be able to express certain emotions that will affect people. You know, emotions are contagious. So if you ask the right questions, you can actually bring out stuff from people that will affect other people, you know. And he said something I'll not forget, Ben Doche-Malo. He said, journalism must inform, educate, entertain, and transform. And I think interviews must also transform. Yeah, interviews. The prostitute interview transformed a lot of people because they kind of thought, oh, wow, she sounds really educated. Her situation sounds like it could be anybody could get involved. She had 4 children. None of them knew what she did, you know, and the risks, you know, and the fact that she said, there was one thing she said, that when other women call her a prostitute, she feels really bad. Because she thinks that if you are a young girl, you're not married, you have a boyfriend, and he gives you money before you sleep with him, then you're also like her. Only reason being that you are on the street and she's not on the streets. You know, so it's an interesting way of seeing things, but it's just from curiosity. You know, and you can get a lot done just by being curious. That's the most important quality of an interviewer. Curiosity. Most important. Oprah Winfrey had it, Larry King had it, all the great interviewers have it. Just being curious. And Larry King had another rule that I want to share with you. He said, anytime you hear an interviewer saying I, or my, then the interview is about him and not, or her, and not about the guest. So I think you shouldn't have yourself inside the interview. Remember, selfie mode versus real camera mode. That you must focus on the person. It's not about you. You know, it's not about you. You know, so for example, the interview I had with Rex Omar, who is the chairman of GAMRO. I know Rex Omar I've known him since 1990. I've actually even played music on his albums. But I don't tell anybody that, and it's not important for me to let people know that I played on his music. You know, if he says it, fine, but I won't. It's not germane to the conversation. You understand? He's there to talk about how Ghanaian musicians can make more money from their royalties. Let's stick to that. Okay? Don't get distracted. But of course, if he says something that it might be interesting, you can go and do it and then come back. Okay? Okay, so with that, I think I want to hear from a couple of questions from the people on the floor here with respect to interviews, interview secrets. Is there anything that you want clarified? I'd love to hear from you before we get to our people on Zoom. Okay. Yes, go ahead. That's Hans.
Yes, Hans. So how do you follow up on social issues Example, the Akosombo's village.
Yes.
So maybe you went to interview,
Mm-hmm.
and you've come back as a journalist. How do you follow up and make sure that, as you've got us how to interview,
Follow up. Okay.
Follow up on social issues?
All right. So the Volta Dam was spilled a couple of months back, and the water went through many towns in the lower Volta Basin. We were the first people to get there and report on it live from the scene. And then I've been there 4 times to go and speak to them. So we went there the first time, found out what the situation was. But we didn't leave it there. We came back and then we organized a drive to help the people. So till now, we are still sending relief items to the people. Yeah. So we follow up on the story. So, for example, when we realized that they were not having enough illumination and mosquitoes were worrying them and waste disposal was a problem, we went back there and did a story on it. We did a story on how they were being fed while they were in the refugee camps. We did a story on now help coming to them after the dam spillage had ended and what the situation was. We did a focus on the business angle of things where we spoke to companies that were affected, not just people. So we've seen different angles and we followed up to try and find out what help has come to them. For example, this big tilapia farm that was destroyed, Flowcell was destroyed by the. We went back and said and asked whether he had received any help from the government, because the government said they were giving some money to go help the people. It turns out they didn't get help. So now we know that what they promised or what they said they did didn't match with what. That's also another story. So Flowcell, affected farmers have not received the help that government says they've had. Simple follow-up. Today, there was a simple case of follow-up today. So I read in the news today that there's no longer the use of indelible ink for elections. Starting from this district level elections, they're not going to use indelible ink anymore. They're going to be using facial recognition and eyes to biometric registration. So one of our guys was on site at a polling station in Kanda today. And so after his report, I just remembered that, I'm just reading that there's no more indelible ink. He should tell us whether they are using indelible ink or not. The moment they tell us that they are using it, that means that there's a gap between what the government promised and what's on the ground. Fortunately, there's no gap. So, because nobody's using indelible ink anymore. That's a classic case of follow-up. And now the people know that this is what is happening. And we are informing people, and we are using follow-up to get people to know what story has developed. Any more questions?
Okay. Somebody's asking, what's the motivation for following up?
Oh, to get a fuller picture of the story.
And a solution to it?
Yes. A fuller picture of the story, a solution to the problem. Yeah, that's what you want. Okay.
I thought we were supposed to empathize. Maybe the person was crying.
Yes.
The person was crying.
Yeah.
When you say sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. But yes, keep quiet.
I just kept quiet. See, sometimes some people, it gets even more sometimes they just want to. Archbishop Palmer Buckle, Archbishop of Cape Coast, he told me something I've never forgotten. He says, listen, sometimes when somebody is confronted with a tragedy, maybe a friend of yours has lost a father or a mother, fresh, like yesterday or right now. It's the will of God. Oh, the Lord has given, the Lord has taken. Sometimes it even annoys the people even more. I've just lost my dad. What are you telling me is the will of God? So sometimes, he says sometimes the best gift you can give them is just silence. Let the person just be, don't hold their hand, be with them, let them grieve. You know? Let them grieve. You don't know. How do you know the will of God? Are you God? But people sometimes they say these stock phrases thinking that they are comforting people. Sometimes silence is just the best gift you can give people. Yeah. Okay. Is anybody on Zoom? My Zoom people? We don't have any questions on Zoom. How about yes, Hamdia.
What should you do? Maybe you are interviewing.
What should you do? Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Maybe you are interviewing a guest, and let's say you are interviewing someone, and the person is speaking against the president. What should you, the
interviewer, do?
Yeah.
Are you the president's spokesperson?
No.
So what do you want to do?
The person is speaking against the president.
Example. Give me an example. Give me an example.
Really?
Give me an example. So if the person is insulting, you don't allow that. You don't allow insulting behavior. No. But if the person disagrees with the president, you can disagree with the president. It's not a crime. But don't say things that you can't prove. Don't be insulting. Okay? He's a bloody thief. No, you don't allow stuff. We don't accept that kind of language on the set. We have to take you off. Sorry. In some areas, they have a 7-second delay on whatever comes out of your mouth. So you say something, and 7 seconds later, the people in the rest of the world will hear it. So when an insult or a curse word comes out, they can actually stop it before it's transmitted. We don't have that technology in Ghana. Yes. Okay, Roberta has a question. Interview. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
We spoke about doorstep interview.
Yes.
To find out how you can do it.
Yes.
Without making your interviewee feel ambushed.
Well, you see, that kind of interview by its very nature is an ambush interview. I remember one Manchester City player who had been in court for so long. Benjamin Mendy, his career had been totally destroyed by allegations of sexual misconduct against him. They took him off the team, they took his salary off. I mean, he lost endorsements, everything. And after a very long time, he went to court and was found not guilty. When he came out of the courtroom, the journalists started asking him questions. Mendy, how do you feel about blah, 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 blah? You know, there's no more doorstep interview. All he said was, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Praise be to God. And he just kept going. He didn't say a single word apart from that. You see, as the interviewee, you control the interview. You can decide what to say. Let them ask what they want to ask. You also answer the question. What they were looking for a good sound bite to make out of a story, to make into a story. And he didn't give them that opportunity. And that was, for me, that was one of the classic responses. All he kept saying was, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, all praise to God, all praise to God. Man, listen, can you put yourself in the man's shoes? After years, I don't know how long that, it took a long time. And can you imagine the friends he's lost, the opportunities he's lost? He's a footballer, but he can't play football. Nobody will come near you because of this thing hanging around your head. Me Too, people will be all over you, all kinds of things. And he was found not guilty in the end. And they wanted to interview. As a journalist, you have to ask the questions. Because they send you out there to go and get a soundbite from Mendy. You know, and he just left. Doorstep interviews are by nature ambush interviews. So yeah, that's why you have to get to the point. You have to get to the point. You have to be polite, but get to the and persistent. And the journalist was very persistent. They worked with Mendy and his lawyer for a long time and kept asking the question. He just wanted a soundbite, but Mendy didn't give them that satisfaction. So that was good on Mendy. He was well trained as far as media training is concerned. I think he did a good job. Yes. Any more? Interview questions? Yes, go ahead. We're done.
There's a question.
Okay, Zoom. Let's have the Zoom question. You can read it out.
Is it appropriate to send your questions to the interviewee before the interview?
I wouldn't send my questions to the interviewee. I'll tell you this is the areas I want to cover. I won't send word for word questions. Unless, of course, I know some journalists do WhatsApp interviews where, so the whole interview is not that you are sending in the questions for them to come into the studio, to come to the interview. The whole interview is done on WhatsApp. So I send a question, they respond, or I send a voice note, they respond. In that case, I can do that, but I will not send you my questions, dito, for you to come to the studio, for me to ask the same questions to you. No, it's redundant. I'll tell you, we're going to cover this. That's it.
How do you control your guests during?
How do you control your guests during the interview? For the politicians, I have a horn. Pom, 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 pom. When they're talking too much, I hit that horn. You know, but you can be firm. He says, okay, I think you've had enough of your take on this. Let's allow for a conversation. Let's have the next person. Let's let Lucia come in now. And then you bring it in. And just be firm. You should be seen to be fair. Don't take sides. And when you take sides, people will notice. You yourself will notice. And your guests will notice. All right? Yeah. Okay, Lucia.
So let's say you are on a live show or production and then there is a calling.
respondents from a different location, and then the respondents keep talking too much, and how do you calmly hang up?
Oh, so you can summarize the question. So in actual fact, what you're trying to say is that this and that is that. Is that correct? Well, thank you so much. And then your people on the phone will help you and they'll cut it. They do it a lot on BBC. Have you heard BBC? BBC have hard stop times. If the news is coming on at 8 o'clock, the show will end maybe 7:58. You actually hear the music of the show ending under, and then you hear the presenter. If there's somebody on the line, the presenter will say, well, that's well, in actual fact, what you're trying to say is this and this. Thank you so much for your time, Hamdia. And that's the end of news night. Boom, then they go. So yes, listen to, that's why you have to listen very carefully and summarize what they were trying to say. Some people are trying to say something, but it takes a while for them to gather their thoughts. So help them. Help your neighbor. So in actual fact, courage, what you're trying to say is, thank you so much for your time. That was courage, talentedness from, yeah, and then you go. All right? Okay.
So, remember to ask
2 questions.
What happens to the rest of the questions while you follow up with the responses that you
I always want to know what my last question is. You cannot answer. I've done interviews where I didn't ask certain questions. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have asked this question, you know. But now you can rectify it. For example, on GTV, The Breakfast Show, if we've done through the question, we've done, recently we interviewed some recovering drug addicts, and we finished the interview, but there were some still issues that we had to follow up with. We took them to our social media office, and then they did another interview to camera, and we posted that on social media. But you will not answer all the questions in the world. Just answer the important ones. If somebody is in the news for a particular reason, you must answer that question. You must ask that question, the reason for which the person is in the news. You know, at this point in time, if any Catholic bishop comes on the air and you do not ask them a question about the Pope's blessing, you failed as a journalist. Because that's the hot issue now. Is it not? Yeah. So know what the hot issues are and make sure you answer. You cannot answer all the questions in the world. So, yeah. So basically that's it.
So the second question, how do you change topics smoothly when you ask a tricky question that angers the guest?
Okay, go and look for the E.T. Mensah interview I did with him on GH1. So, so the person gets angry and he said, okay, moving away from this particular issue, let's say it. Let's move away from this area, and so those are transition phrases. Let's now switch over to this particular issue, which I think will be very interesting for you. Then you go. Or moving away from this topic, let's now move towards. Listen to, for me, my training came from listening to BBC. The BBC journalists are very well trained. Very, very well trained. They know how to ask correct questions. They know how to transition. They know how to end people who talk too much. They know how to set things up, you know. Hard Talk is a really good show you should listen to on BBC. Hard Talk is, you can find it on YouTube as well, okay? Yeah, those transitions, they are really important to get so that your thing doesn't, because they may give you 5 different questions on 5 different issues. And if you just answer the first question, bam, and then there's no link, and then bam, it's like you're hopping. You should like walk into the next question. You shouldn't just. There's a term in editing, jump cut. Yeah, it's so sudden. What's happening? Boom! What's happening here? Boom! What's going on? Why is the guy high? Withdrawal symptoms. What's going on? You know, you should walk into the next thing very coolly, then walk into the next one, then walk into the next one. It's so very, very calm. Okay. Yes. Be friendly, be curious, follow up. You know, if you're going to ask tough questions, don't squeeze your face. Just be smiling and then ask the question. You know, it's an art. It's not really a science. There's no formula to it. But you kind of pick it up by watching really good interviewers. Oprah Winfrey is great. Oprah Winfrey is just wonderful. Find her interviews on YouTube. Larry King too. Okay, I'm biased towards Larry King, but Oprah Winfrey. This man swears a lot, but you can learn from him. Howard Stern. Howard Stern is the richest, wealthiest media guy, radio person, I think, in the world right now. Howard Stern. Howard Stern, a lot of vulgarity, but he's really, take away, you can edit the vulgarity and just listen to his style. He asks really pointed questions, and gets people to talk. He's really good at that. Yeah. Who else? I used to enjoy this man a lot when he was interviewing David Ampofo. David Ampofo, Time with David. It's on YouTube. It's Ghanaian. Really good interviewer. Yeah. Okay.
Knowing your audience or your interview is
Yes.
very key to interviewing. So, looking at sensational topics, do you really need to also get emotional as the interviewer?
No, if you're all emotional, then who is in charge, man?
So maybe you are interviewing someone in a very serious medical condition or
Yes.
say a disabled people.
Yeah.
Are you supposed to be smiling during the interview? You're supposed to, you
No,
don't want to
no,
get them into
no,
that
no.
bad emotion.
I realize that when you're talking to people who are physically challenged or have some kind of disability, they don't like you to pity them.
Sure.
They want you to treat them just regular. Okay? Yes. I remember about to interview a blind person, and I asked him, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to be called, when I say blind, are you often say, listen, I'm blind, call me blind. Don't do visually impaired or all that stuff. Visually challenged, just look, I'm blind. Okay? Yeah, so sometimes we have too much pity for people, and they don't have pity, they just have a normal life. I interviewed Selassie Sikanku. He's a blind presenter and producer. He's called DJ Odo on GTV, on GBC Radio. He's a regular guy.
But you may also want to look at your audience who are watching the interview.
No, but
Probably you're smiling and someone is giving a comment like, see what you did. You're interviewing someone like
no, but you smile when it's appropriate to smile. If they're telling you a sad story, you're not smiling at a sad story. You are matching the emotion.
And the words, like you said, using blind or visually impaired.
Yes, but don't forget about the people. The man himself had no problem with me calling him blind, because I asked him before I went on air. I said, "Do you have any problem with me? How do you want to be addressed?" He said, "He's blind. He's a blind presenter. No big deal." You understand? Yes. Okay. Courage.
Okay, so I want to find out, being curious with your guest.
Yes.
And in situations where the guest allows you to ask any question that you want to.
Yes.
Is it necessary to sort of explore controversial issues surrounding the person's lifestyle?
Yes.
In terms of, let's say,
If there's-
sexuality?
Well, if there's no holds barred, if the person has no problem going where you're going, go. Yeah, go. The problem is if the person didn't want you to go there and you went there and there was no agreement to go there, then you're going to have a problem. Okay, we're going to wrap this up now. We've been doing this for over an hour right now. But just remember the secrets. Do your research. Use social media, it works. Go into people's social media. All the information is there. Remember to ask short questions. Listen carefully. Follow up. Be persistent. Be curious. Curiosity is develop your curiosity. Always ask, why is this so? Always. You get great interviews. Why did he say this? Even that's a question. You can even do a question, you can do an interview based on what the person said. So you said this and this and this and this. Why? What was your... And there are ways of saying why. Because sometimes why can sound too direct. So what was your reason for saying this? It's the same as saying, why did you say this? Or what was going through your mind when you said this? It's the same as why did you say it? Or what accounts for the reasons behind you saying this? It's also the same way as saying why something was said, okay? Explore different ways of saying the same thing. But the issue is to get something out of the person using the secrets that I've taught you. This is what Larry King taught me and other things that I learned in my journey as an interviewer. Thank you so much. Comment. Last question?
Yes.
It has to be brief.
Yes. It all comes back to public speaking. So my main focus was dealing with forums, like in public speaking. How do you want to really focus
on both the panels and then the audience in public forums like that.
Okay, we reserve that for the next session. All right. Okay, we'll deal with issues of panel discussions and things like that later on. Okay, thank you so much. Like, comment, share, hit the notification bell. See you in the next video. Thank you. God bless.